and welcome to this short presentation on copyright and electronic or e-theses. We'll discuss why we've moved to having electronic theses rather than having print copies of your thesis, the copyright issues that arise from placing your thesis online, and how to submit your electronic thesis to our online research archive, Shura. So, why do we ask for electronic theses? We have to have a copy of the version of record of your thesis, that is the final accepted and agreed version. Historically, this would have been a print copy of your thesis kept in the library. More recently, universities have also taken an electronic copy and placed this on their repository or archive. This has made theses much more widely available, much easier to find, read and use. These are the principal benefits of an electronic thesis: findability, accessibility and increased chance of being used, being cited. It makes it much easier to share the details of your work, much easier to promote your work. More recently still, universities have moved away from taking a print copy at all and have relied on the electronic version as the version of record. And this year, 2017-18, SHU has joined these universities. You now only need to submit an electronic copy of your thesis. This will be the version of record, the version that other people can find and use. And whilst this has the benefits of findability and accessibility, it does introduce certain considerations that a print thesis doesn't, the principal one being copyright. So what are the copyright issues? In doing your research, you can make use of third-party copyright material. That's material where somebody else owns the copyright, as long as you provide an adequate reference. If you make less than substantial use of third-party copyright material, you do not need to seek permission. If you do make substantial use of third-party copyright material, you may need to seek permission if copyright law does not give you a specific exception. Unfortunately, what constitutes substantial use isn't clearly defined in the statute. Typical examples include illustrations, maps, diagrams, and the reproduction of large amounts of text. If you can argue that your substantial use of third-party copyright material is covered by an exception, then you can include it in your electronic thesis that we share online. The principal exception is criticism. So you include a substantial amount of third-party copyright material, but you argue that it is necessary and relevant to the work that you are doing within the thesis. The use made of this substantial material must be fair. Again, like substantial, fair isn't defined very clearly in the statute, but you must consider the use of the material you're making. Are you using only as much material as is needed for the purposes of your thesis? What is the balance between reproducing somebody else's material and you commenting on and discussing it? If, in considering your use of substantial amounts of third-party copyright material, you do not feel you're covered by an exception, then you may need to seek permission. If the third-party item is still in copyright, or the author hasn't waived their copyright through some kind of Creative Commons or similar license, then you will need to seek permission. This can be a time-consuming process, identifying the copyright holder, writing to them, waiting to get back from them. So as soon as you think you're going to be making substantial use of third-party copyright material and it's not covered by a copyright exception, you need to put in train the process of seeking permission. If you get explicit written permission, you can include the item in the electronic thesis which is shared on Shura. If you don't, you will need to remove the item from the electronic thesis you'll share on Shura. And this will mean you will send us two files. The version of record, that's the version your examiners saw with all the material included, and then an edited version with any material you've not been given permission for removed. It's important to note that your examination thesis is not affected by copyright considerations. It's only when you go to put your thesis online you have to potentially seek permission. The process of submitting your thesis. You fill in a thesis deposit agreement form, which you'll find on our website, and you submit this along with a PDF/A version of the version of record of your thesis. That's the final agreed version. If you've had to seek permission for copyright items and you've been given permission for all of them, you can include acknowledgement of this in the version of record. However, if you've been refused permission for any substantial use of copyright items, you'll need to produce a second edited version of your file with those items removed and a note included to say where things have been removed. You then send the thesis deposit agreement form and the file or files to the student systems team, and then they make sure that all the processes are followed. They send it on to the Shura team and they put your thesis online. The thesis will go online immediately unless you request otherwise. On the thesis deposit agreement form, there is the option to choose a standard 1-year embargo. So Shura will have the thesis but will not share it for a year. If you require longer than that, you'll have to get permission from your head of research degrees, who will sign a form which you will then send in with your thesis. You would ask for an embargo if, for example, you're working on producing a book or some articles based on your thesis and you need time to do that, or your publisher does not allow for theses going online. So in summary, e-theses make your work more accessible, easier to find, easier to read, more likely to be used. But you do need to be aware of copyright issues. Remember, this only affects the thesis you want to put online. It does not affect your examination thesis. You can include substantial use of third-party copyright materials, even if it doesn't come under an exception or fair use, in your examination thesis. But the thesis is going to go online, you need to consider: have you made substantial use of third-party copyright material? If you have, is it covered by one of the copyright exceptions? If it isn't covered by a copyright exception, is the work itself covered by copyright? And if it is, seek permission. If you've not got permission for certain items, you'll need to then edit your thesis and send us 2 files, the original version and the version edited for copyright reasons. Then send your file and the completed thesis deposit agreement, and the relevant teams will do the rest. You can get further help and guidance on this topic from our website, blogs.shu.ac.uk/library research support, and go to the Your Thesis page, by email library-research-support@shu.ac.uk, or by phone 0114 225 3852.